Welcome, everyone. I am Karen Shapiro, a Vice President of Partners for Progressive Israel. Thrilled that you all are with us for this webinar, West Bank Settler Violence, a first-person Palestinian account from the South Hebron Hills with Eid Suleman. Before I introduce Eid and our moderator, Gili Getz, let me note Partners for Progressive Israel is an American not-for-profit organization dedicated to the achievement of a durable and just peace between Israel and its neighbors. We believe in the need to ensure civil rights, equality, and social justice for all of Israel's inhabitants. Partners seeks to deepen Americans' understanding of Israel's complexities so that we can better advocate for a progressive Israeli future. Partners is particularly excited to be hosting this briefing today during our Stop the Evictions campaign, and we invite everyone to visit the Stop the Evictions page on our website, progressiveisrael.org, for more information. While you are there, please contribute to our Stop the Evictions Matching Grant Challenge, where every donation will be matched dollar for dollar. Now, to introduce our speakers, we welcome you, Eid Suleman, a Palestinian peace activist, artist, and photographer from the village of al-Khair, located in the South Hebron Hills area of the occupied West Bank. Eid's work focuses on peace building and the defense of human rights of the Palestinian communities in the South Hebron Hills, including the struggle against settler violence, military occupation, home demolitions, and Israeli expulsion efforts. Since the age of 12, Eid has been building miniature-sized jeeps, bulldozers, and helicopters from plastic, iron, and other scraps, thus turning the tools of oppression into sculpture. And Eid's photography provides a window into the life of the Bedouin communities in Area C of the West Bank, where Israel maintains full control over every aspect of life. Our moderator today, Gili Getz, is an Israeli-American photojournalist, actor, and activist. He served as a photographer for the Israel military and news editor of ENET. His work in recent years has been focusing on Jewish American politics and is published regularly in Jewish and Israeli press. His one-man play, The Forbidden Conversation, explores the challenges of having a conversation about Israel in the American Jewish community. And Gili is Vice President of Partners and a dear friend, and it's great. Thank you for being here. Today's format, Gili will start by asking Eid some questions. When you have a question, we ask that you type it into the chat, and Gili will ask them of Eid as he goes along. So let's get started. Gili,
thank you so much. Thank you so much, Karen, and thank you so much, Eid, and everybody who joined us in this very, very urgent moment as we see increase in settler violence. I'd like to give it a little framing. The American ambassador to the UN in a visit to Israel earlier this week denounced the sharp increase of settler violence against Palestinians. She said, "We're deeply concerned by the violence perpetrated by Israeli settlers in the West Bank against Palestinians and their property." On Monday, the Knesset will hold a hearing about this. We've been horrified to see in the last few months a sharp increase in settler violence with almost complete impunity, virtually no arrests or investigations in the South Hebron Hills and other areas in the occupied West Bank. The settler violence include beatings, throwing stones, torching fields, destroying olive trees and crops, using live fire, vandalism of homes and cars, chasing Palestinian farmers and shepherds away from their fields and water sources, all often results in injuries and bleedings of Palestinian farmers. Soldiers do have the authority and duty to arrest and prevent these settler attacks, but they very often just stand by and just watch. The reality is compounded by the civil administration's efficient demolitions of homes, water tanks, restrictions on water, and destruction of Palestinian infrastructure without permits, and these permits are virtually impossible to get. And all this is happening while settlements nearby are supported by paved roads, water supply, security, infrastructure, and funding. Israeli Jews who come to stand in solidarity with those farming Palestinian communities also often experience settler violence and intimidation themselves. Rabbi Eric Asherman was injured the last week, and also members of Combatants for Peace were injured trying to deliver water to a Palestinian village in the South Hebron Hills. Allowing settler violence seemed to be part of a strategy, as B'Tselem report indicated, to advance Palestinian dispossession in these areas of Bedouin communities in Area C, promoting de facto annexation of these areas, often by declaring them military zones or by allowing illegal settlements, outposts, and construction, creating reality on the ground, as we say. We are so honored and excited to be joined by Eid, who is a wonderful activist and artist who I met many, many years ago on my trip with the Center for Jewish Nonviolence in Al-Khair. Been following ever since. It's incredible to see the resilience and the struggle of these communities. And the beautiful photography of Eid. We'll share some photos today. So let us jump right into it, Eid. So first of all, it's great to see you, and I hope you're well and safe. And maybe we can start by just telling us a little bit about Al-Khair and the Bedouin communities around, a little bit of a history and kind of the daily reality. We've been seeing for many years. This escalation violence didn't start today. It's been going on for many years. Maybe give us a little bit of background and of how the communities got there, and a little bit of the history and reality of it.
Thank you, dear Gili, very much for hosting me tonight and this evening, and everyone who is, joining us, and for Karen for sure. And I am one of the people who I am with a group of activists, my friends in the field. I'm just not me alone who's, going in the field every day. We have also our friends who, stay with us, and also the Palestinian colleagues, my friends from other villages, even though my cousins from my village, Al-Khair, also they are photographers and activists also following, but most of the time I do this with my friends, daily. So nowadays it's a daily, going, behind what happened from settlers and the military in Area C, and especially in South Hebron Hills. South Hebron Hills is, is a big place, is a big landscape in the south of the West Bank until the Green Line. East of the Road 60, it's all Area C, which is a big majority of land which controlled by the Israeli government and the military and police. And we have Palestinian communities and settlements built in 80s, in South Hebron Hills. Al-Khair is one of the villages which also located in Masaf Riyata in South Hebron Hills, as 100 of Palestinian communities who is unrecognized, without master plan, without any infrastructures or anything else. I mean, it's one of the example of 100 of communities which not allowed to contact to the infrastructures in general. In the meantime, we saw the settlements beside of us connected to all the infrastructures in all from since 40 years or 35 years. Even though the new outpost is connected to the water, and the infrastructures more than the Palestinian societies who close and live in side by side, but they're not allowed to have any kind of contact with the source of life. Al community started after 1948 when my family evacuated from Negev. The big tribe of Jahalin was evacuated from Negev after the war between Israel and the Palestinians, and then we find ourselves as refugees staying in South Hebron Hills. Then the family of me stay in Khair, as many communities around, and then we stay there all these years until I born in 80s, 83 I born, and then Carmel settlements and all of the settlements, started the building of the settlers in 80s, and then they built the settlements in all South Hebron Hills, and also beside Khair, where I'm living, we have Carmel, Mount Susia, and Bet Yatir, all these old settlements built in one line, and east of Yatta city, which a big major Palestinian city, which located in Area A. Now, east of Yatta, it's all Area C, and Israel control. We know what's Area C and B and A. That's this agreement in Paris, which signed between the PA and the Israeli governments in 90s, that say Israel control Area C, all of it, fully control of the people who live in Area C, and B, it's in between, and A is fully controlled by the Palestinian Authority, police and the civil control. Then 60% of the Palestinian people who live in Area C, more than 60,000 people live in Area C in all the West Bank. We found ourselves living under the Israeli control, and we live in this nowadays 27 years under this kind of dividing lands between C and B and A. And the majority of the Palestinian people who live in Area C, we're not allowed to have all our rights in living and building our homes safely, or paving our roads even, or contact to the electricity, even though it's very basic rights in the 21st century nowadays. We're not allowed to do that. Most of the communities in Area C are not allowed to contact to this right, which basic right, even though if we look into Khair, we see that the settlers, paved the road which go to the chicken farms. And even though the electricity line is going up of the houses of Khair, and the water pipe go to the chicken farm from 35 years ago, but not allowing Khair to be contact to that. That's, it's a picture by itself. If we talking about Susia village, last year the ICA contact the military base and the old archaeological place with the water pipes, and not allowing Palestinian Susia, which not far away from the pipe, 5 meters away from the pipe, not allowing people of Susia to contact to the water. I'm talking about the basic. I'm not talking even though yet about the violence or the harassment or the demolition, which happened nowadays daily, on a daily basis against the Palestinian societies who live in Area C. Even though in the meantime, we saw in the settlements or the outposts, which built in 2000 and growing very well. We don't know if it's legal or illegal, but we heard it's illegal by Israeli law, several years ago, but Israel never demolished any house to the settlers, even though it's illegal. But if we look to the Palestinian communities beside those outposts, we saw the demolition in every week in South Hebron Hills. Even today, they block the roads for villages in South Hebron Hills, which contact those villages to the highway. Last Monday, they demolish a house and they confiscate, several things from South Hebron Hills. 1 week before, they demolish a house, and 1 week before, they do a lot of things. It's all coming together against the Palestinian people. but never give them any right which they ask, even though the Palestinian people, they try to make a master plans to their communities and they try to approve it. They go to their lawyers, they have, consulting people who, advise them to do that. When they approve all these papers and give it to the Israeli courts, mostly they reject them in general for these communities who are living in South Hebron Hills. And this is a policy which going to Al also and all these 100 villages around in South Hebron Hills and Masafriyata. This is the main challenge which we have daily, that the home demolitions and the settler violence, which increase really very real in these last, in this year specifically, and this month is also, we saw actions every day from settlers. We saw actions every day from the IDF, and we saw a lot of, it's ongoing process between the ICA and the Israeli IDF and the government. We thought we believe that it's an Israeli policy to following the Palestinian people who live in Area C. It's not like, as you say in the beginning, it's not a criminal work done by some people and they want to do that and then they will be arrested or taken to the justice. No, this is in a basic day. These actions happen to kick away more than Palestinians, to prevent more than Palestinians to live in their homes safely in South Hebron Hills or in Area C in general. The idea that Israeli government do this policy, the Israeli IDF and the police always going on with this without stopping these people from doing these actions against the Palestinian people. Not stopping the settlers who are attacking the Palestinian people, but imagine any Palestinian, even though stand in the highway or stand with his sheep to grazing them in the mountain, immediately they will arrest him and take him to the police station. And then it will take him one night investigations. Look at that. And then he will be released after the people pay plenty of money as a fine to release him back from the police station or the jail. Maybe this guy will go to the military court, even though because he grazing his animals in that area which he not allowed to go in. I'm talking about the Palestinian people. In the meantime, the settlers do all this without any stopping by the police, without any interrupted by the IDF, even though the IDF, helping, just standing between them and the Palestinians and do nothing to stop this harassment. And everybody saw what happened last week in Masafriyata and South Hebron Hills. It's happening always and always. It's happened 1 month before in Mufaggara village when they do the big attack. And it's happened 2 weeks last Wednesday before. And then it happened. And it was a very massive night for the Palestinian people in Masafriyata. But the IDF, it's one thing. If the IDF want to stop this, they can't stop this in the beginning. But the soldiers have maybe ordered to not do anything or interrupt in this, to stop the Palestinian, not stop the settlers. And this is what's going on nowadays. And indeed, it's increase nowadays in South Hebron Hills. Also, we see increase of the home demolition and confiscation of materials from Palestinian societies who are living really in a bad conditions in a daily life. For there's a lot of poor families who barely standing and staying in their land. And then we saw the ICA came with all these tools and all these trucks, all these big bulldozers, and they demolish their tents or demolish their home and then confiscate their stuff and take them away and to prevent them from staying there. This is what happened. We saw increase of home demolitions. We see that the ICA were demolishing water cisterns also, which really very expensive to the Palestinian society to build them, to collect water from the rain or from bringing water tanks to put it as a storage for emergency in summer. is this is all happened always in the West Bank, and it's never stopped. We saw it just increase more and more against the Palestinian society in Area C.
Thank you so much, Eid. Like you say, you live in a place where you live under occupation, where there's two sets of laws, one for Israeli Jews and one for Palestinians. But there's also two sets of bureaucracies that you have to deal with. One is incapable of stopping violence that everybody knows is coming and everybody can see, and the other one is very efficient at destroying homes, destroying water tanks, destroying solar panels, destroying roads. So you have to deal with two separate bureaucracies that obviously not designed to serve the communities, but are designed for something else. I'd like to invite people to write questions in the Q&A section, and not the comment section, in the Q&A button. And you can ask Eid questions if you want to know anything specific. I'd like to show Eid, if that's okay, a few photos. So because this is a daily type of violence, I just picked a few last ones that we got from the demolition and destructions. Maybe you can tell us a little bit about that particular incident, but also kind of how widely this type of tactic of preventing water, preventing electricity to these communities plays out in the South Hebron hills. And these are also for some of your colleagues and neighbors doing incredible work documenting this every single day with great courage and persistency. Let me just share the screen here. Let me just share the screen. Here we go. Let me know if you can see. If you can see it. This is a sunset Eid took. Beautiful sunset or sunrise, Eid? I don't remember.
Sunrise.
The sunrise in the South Hebron Hills. It's just gorgeous. And your nature photography is also gorgeous in these areas. So destruction of property, destruction of cars, like settlers come and they just destroy the cars. So what happens when a settler comes and throw rocks at a car and it's completely destroyed? Who pays for it? Is there any way to complain about this, even though a lot of it is on video and all that?
Yeah, I mean, the Palestinian people go and complain to the Israeli police in Kiryat Arba station, and they show the police evidence like pictures and videos. But as we know from long years ago, when we do a lot of complaints as a Palestinian who live in Area C, it's never go to the direct way to stop, the people who do this action, even though you have pictures or videos for them doing this physically, live sometimes. The Israeli police, okay, say yes, bring us the pictures, they saw it, and you do a complaint in the police station, and they put a file, and then they put it in the desk, and you wait and wait and wait until something changes. Also, the settlers do complain against the Palestinian, by the way. But the settler, if they complain against any Palestinian, he will be arrested immediately, or in the night, or in the day, or be invited to a police station, and then they will take him to investigations. The problem also, if the Palestinian go to complain about his property, which demolished and damaged or broken like this, it's a bureaucracy that the Palestinian people stay in the gate waiting maybe 3 hours or 2 hours until they get in to do a complaint against what happened from the settlers. See, it's the opposite. And the Palestinians have different way to go in to the police station, rather the settlers who go from the direct way easily without, interrupted by the police or making them late. This is what happened. And no compensation about the Palestinian property, which demolished like cars or, killing maybe sometimes sheep or, beating the people themselves. Mostly there's no compensation. Sometimes the compensation came after, home demolition, maybe if they demolish a home or they demolish a water system. Maybe some NGOs come to help to rebuild this maybe water system or rebuild this tent or rebuild this house. But this process is taking a lot of time, which is not easy to do. It's a process going on. You need to file a lot of, papers or taking a lot of pictures for your property which damage, then maybe you get the help after long time. But for cars and animals which dead, mostly you're not confiscated by the Israeli authority. I'm talking here, Israeli authority never confiscate Palestinians who got damage or harassment from settlers or from the IDF itself. It's never happened. Maybe the help or the compensation came from, foreigner NGOs or from the Palestinian Authority itself. But it's never came from the Israeli Authority and the government itself, or it is, organizations which work under.
And while settler structures, outposts, and growing, flourishing settlements are untouched, even though they're illegal by Israeli law, Bedouin Palestinian communities in the South Hebron Hills get their homes confiscated and demolished. And I'll just show some photos of the civil administration destroying water pipes, destroying, taking away homes, destroying tents. If this is not mistaken, is a mourning tent after the attack by settlers from a nearby family. Even that has been destroyed.
Yeah, that's it.
Obviously,
yes.
home demolitions.
Right.
Home demolitions, in the intimidation of settlers while the military, this was extremely obscene one in Susia in the child's playground, where settlers came with dogs and were intimidating the children and the population. I mean, there's no, there is no real enforcement of that, and obviously
Really?
constant home demolitions. Yes, Eid?
Yeah, I mean, the IDF last week, I mean, in Susia, they can't, even though barely they begging the settlers to go out from the playground, It's really very, I mean, unbelievable that the IDF with all this authority, and always we hear in the Israeli media, IDF is the reborn, I mean, in the West Bank, or the
authority,
and then the
sovereign.
soldiers, yeah, the authority. The sovereign is the IDF in Area C, okay? This is what we heard in the Israeli media always, and they, say it in the media. But we saw the settlers trying to beg in the settlers to go out of the playground in Susia. I mean, that's, one of the things which really, is strange, and that show how the policy going on. The IDF supposed to be, the Israeli soldiers supposed to be just to be following the settlers, orders, and following their, introduction always. That's what we know from the experience which we have in Area C.
And here we see water towers that the settlers put up just for the settlements, and obviously those are untouched and protected, unlike Palestinian water tanks that are being destroyed for lack of a permit. One of the often methods is declaring a zone, a military zone, a closed military zone. The military can do it at any time, pretty much anywhere, or a firing zone. Can you tell us a little bit about that? That seems to be the ongoing method of preventing Palestinians from picking up olives or hurting their sheep, or just being present anywhere, by evoking that this is a military zone at any given moment with absolutely no explanation.
Yeah, always. The military zone policy, which used by the soldiers in the field and by the commander in the field who signed the paper in the field, it's always done against the Palestinian people and the people who help them. It's never, you saw, they show in the order and they give the people to film it, but then they didn't take the settlers out of the military zone. They take out the Palestinians from the military zone. This is always what happened. The military zone rule, which they use it every day against the Palestinian societies in South Hebron Hills, it's used just to evacuate the people from their land, evacuate from grazing their animals and sheep, and that's the policy, just to kick them out of their place. This is the idea of military close zone area, which always done against the Palestinian people, not the settlers. Even though the settlers stay, nobody tell them to go out from that place. This is used just to kick out the Palestinians from their own place, to just give the settlers the right to stay and kick out the Palestinians from there. This is what they use always, which used sometimes for 24 hours. Sometimes it's used for 1 hour, just to take the people out of the area which they want to close it. That's it.
Thank you, Eid. And often these structures are destroyed, and the families really don't have any other place to go in the middle of winter, in the middle of a very hot summers in the South Hebron Hills. So what happens? I mean, it seems extremely cruel to leave these people without a shelter, without any type of arrangement. Can you tell us a little bit about, that experience of when these homes are, often demolished, and the families have no other place to go?
Yeah, I mean, it's really very sad. We saw it, I mean, from long time ago, and it's the process going on every time we saw it. I mean, if they demolish a house for a family with children, with small children, it's really a problem for this family to deal with the situation. If it's a hot summer or it's a cold winter in South Hebron Hills, which is very cold sometimes in the winter. And then the families, what they use, sometimes they give immediate shelter as a small tent, which even though not prevent, the cold or the heat for them, even though sometimes the ICA come one day after and they take this tent also. Sometimes the families go to other families, their cousins or their neighbors to stay with them as refugees, and then they wait until somebody help them to rebuild their home. The problem, you can't rebuild the home in the same spot which demolished. If you build the home in the same spot which demolished, the ICA can demolish it with the old order. It's the same order, use always live. You can demolish it and back to demolish it again and again. The families go to their neighbors to stay with them until somebody give help to rebuild their home in a different spot, because you can't build in the same spot.
Thank you, Eid. So we have a lot of questions about what can we do as American Jews, as Americans. What I do know is that anybody that spend time with the beautiful communities of the South Hebron Hills comes back really shocked, really, like, how can this happen? How can this happen? And no one really talks about it. It's more in the news now because of the rise in the insane increased violence in settler violence. But the question is, what can we from here do? I obviously say, write your members of Congress and follow the reality in the South Hebron Hills and bring it to your community. Bring these stories into your community. This has major implications, not only for the people suffering on the ground, but more broadly, the conflict and this ongoing effort of expulsion we see in different areas. In Sheikh Jarrah, we see it in the Jordan Valley, we see it in many areas. This is goes to the very heart of the conflict, and often has to do with 1948. But what would you like us to do or say to help out? Like, what do you find effective, or what would help from your experience?
First of all, we have many friends who, stay with us long these years, Jewish Americans and Israeli friends, peace activists who stay with us. And nowadays they stay in South Hebron Hills, nowadays, even though, and they're witnessing all this every day, Israelis and Americans together. Most of them is, Israeli activists and American Jewish who came from abroad long years ago, and people going back. And a lot of people have, very shocked experience from what happened in the area C, especially in South Hebron Hills. And the people, they have a good relationship with the local people. They make a relationship. They make a lot of, work together. With my colleagues, there is a lot of people, interested to talk about that. from the Americans who visit here and go back. I mean, it's really very clear when you travel to Israel and enter the Holy Land. You will saw all these walls and these gates, and then it's not easy to just enter the West Bank as an American Jewish or Israeli activist. They will ask you where you're going, even though sometimes when they meet those activists in the field with us, you saw the soldiers immediately go into their directions to ask them questions, even though just because they are, peace activists or people who came to help. Always they target them to ask them or questioning them or, asking for their IDs or their passports. It's kind of, showing, we are here as military. Our message from our friends abroad as American Jewish or Israeli activists who live here also, to talk more about what happened in Area C, especially in South Hebron Hills, which really sometimes a place which far away from a media. And as an activist, me and my colleagues on the field, not saying their names because it's kind of something we keep it together. We do our best with our friends and activists who stay with us all the time to show what happened here. By the way, we do it non-violently. We are a very peaceful people, do it in a non-violent way, that we want to show the world what happened here in Masafer Yatta and in South Hebron Hills in general, especially in the villages which located beside the settlements, like Omar Khair, Atwani, Susia, Ala Saifer, and the villages in the firing zone area, 918. 17 villages without, infrastructures, never. Israel always cut their water pipes. Israel always, demolished their roads, block them, and demolish their homes. All these communities are together, they suffer from the same policy. And all these American activists and Israeli activists visit and they witness all what happened there. And I'm sure the friends, when they back home, they talk about it. It's really mix of feelings when you back abroad, back home, and you back with this, image in your mind. You saw it's really far away from what we, talking about. If as an American activist came here and saw it by your own, it's really different than, talking about it in the media. And since 10 years ago and until now, we saw very good. The news has changed about the Palestinian society in Area C, in the US also, and also in Europe, also in different way in the world, because we have a lot of groups came here and visit, and they have experience, and they back and they talk about it in their community. We saw increase in our voice. We saw a lot of friends who care, and that's very well, but we need it more to be, in the high level in the American society, as Congress members or representative who can talk to their communities, to talk to their representative about what happened in Area C here in the West Bank. This is really, we need it more to be talking about it in the US media and in the US societies, as the friends who care about their friends in South Hebron Hills and in Area C in general.
Thank you. And two members of Congress visited Susia on the J Street Codel in recent weeks. Robert, who spent some time in the South Hebron Hills, mentioned that if you're in the region, Breaking the Silence, the Center for Jewish Nonviolence, and Ta'ayush will take you to see and experience the life in the South Hebron Hills, and it is a very powerful experience. And as you said, when you come home, what strikes me is you see this is nothing to do with security. This is everything to do with expulsion. And it's so obvious that it can't make people indifferent, no matter where they are exactly politically on this issue. There is a question, if you have a point of view on it. We see this increase in violence in a time where Israel has a new government, that's supposed to be better, more diverse, more considerate, more. So ironically, the better government became a really nightmare reality for your community and for many Palestinian communities that see increase in violence and such. Do you have any thought about that? Like, do you expect this, and how do you process this?
I mean, most of the Israeli governments, which came in these 2 decades, it's really just mostly it's from the right, and then we see an increase of all these actions in the Area C, and clearly Benjamin Netanyahu said, when he was in the office, he said we will do our sovereignty in most of the Area C. I mean, he said, and we saw that Israeli sovereignty is nowadays going on the ground every day by increasing the building in the settlements around and increasing the demolitions against the Palestinian societies in Area C, which neighbors side by side. And when they talk about this sovereignty last year and this deal, which they talk about, and they do nowadays, you saw the sovereignty in Jordan Valley. It's going on in South Hebron Hills. It's going on. I mean, this is what they're talking about. When the Israeli government changed, we were not to expect any change from this government, even though it's come with, this allies with Ra'am and all these groups who joined them just for the Knesset and to hang this government in Knesset. That's it. They never talk about the Palestinian society in Area C and what's their need. I mean, those Knesset members from the Arab, allies who joined the coalition with Naftali Bennett. They never talk about it, and they say we have our, own problems inside 48. Not yet we are, ready to talk about the problems in Area C and if we can do something about that. In the meantime, we saw Meretz, Knesset members, they joined the protests sometimes in Mufagara when they attack, and before though, when the combatant for peace tried to deliver the water to the community of Abu Hani, and Moshe Razwer was there, and he witnessed what happened from the soldiers when they beat all these activists, Palestinians and Israelis, and they beat them very hard. Moshe Raz, Knesset member, he was there. He trying to talk to the soldiers, and they never hear him. I was there and saw that. I mean, this is one of the things which, make it clear for the Palestinian people that there is no expectation from this government to make something good for the Palestinian people who live in Area C. We will see more harassment. We will see more demolition in the future, in the near future, and we will see more, evacuation of maybe communities, or like Khan al-Ahmar, which they talk about it, but because of the international community, pressure, they can't do that to that community. We're not expecting anything from this government, even though the old government with Benjamin Netanyahu and also Naftali Bennett. We also supposed to mention that before Bibi leave the office, he visited the Susia archaeological place, and he passed by the Palestinian village of Susia, and we saw the border police were, blockade the village of Susia, even though nobody go out or go into the village until Benjamin Netanyahu, do his visit to the archaeological place and, do the celebrations with the settlers, and they leave. So Palestinian village of Susia was, blocked that day, half a day until the visit was done. He came and he visited Susia, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, and he promised he will, give more, projects there, and he will build more for the settlers, but never, they never mentioned the Palestinian people and maybe the peace process itself. It's never mentioned. Nowadays, I'm saying that, and I need to say that, there is no talking about peace process between the Palestinian Authority and the Israeli government. It's never. Nobody talk about it in the media. Just they talking about what they do in future and their programs which we have, and increasing more Israeli sovereignty in South Hebron Hills or in Jordan Valley itself. in general, and that's what happened. I mean, we're not expecting anything from the Israeli, high level people or the government or the Knesset itself, even.
Ben asks, what can we do to provide immediate support for those who have lost olive trees and need access to water and have their home destroyed? Is there a way to help out the those who, the people who are suffering these acts of violence?
Yeah, there is many way to help those communities. I don't know. There is many NGOs who, interested to do this. Kind of help and support these communities who lost their olive trees, maybe, or water wells or water tanks, whatever, and maybe houses. There is many NGOs who are interested to do that. I think we can find out what these NGOs, maybe in the US or in the European Union, who will mostly help to rebuild these things or give, like rebuilding these things which damaged or confiscated. And yeah, we welcome anybody who want to help and maybe rebuild these things. But there is NGOs who do this legally, because sometimes people can't do that, directly from their own, because they will be asked by the government or by the authority, you can do that or do this. But there is NGOs legally they can do that. Maybe some of them, based in Jerusalem, like United Nations or European Union, offices. There's many organizations can do that, and you can contact them also.
Definitely, and there are some Israeli NGOs also on the ground. Maybe make a list and send folks. The attacks on Shabbat. We noticed that a lot of the attacks are happening on Shabbat when the settlers are doing this as a sort of a religious context on Shabbat as a way to create a culture of violence. I'm going to show one image here from the last attack that includes violence and injuries. When these types of attacks get people injured, so what happens? Is there an ambulance service that can take them to the hospital? Is there any way to they have any way to like with vandalism to press charges, or is there any what happens to their health and medical treatment after these attacks? Just give us kind of a sense of that.
Mostly, Palestinians were injured mostly sometimes in the Shabbat or sometimes in other days. They've been hospitalized in Hebron city or in Yatta. They taken by the Palestinian, Red Crescent to the hospital. Sometimes it's taken time to the ambulance to get out of, maybe get in this closed military zone or getting out from this military zone. Sometimes the settlers also attack the ambulance itself if they can, and then it's barely, damage the life of this Palestinian injured people who inside this vehicle also. Last week we saw the settlers, they attacked the ambulance itself, but luckily the people, went outside with the injured people to the hospital and to treat them quickly. We saw we saw sometimes very dangerous attacks. Like injuries, like the child who was, injured in Mufagara. He hospitalized in Israeli hospital. In Beersheba. Sometimes when the injury is very serious, the Israeli authority take the Palestinian injured and take him to Israel to treat him. Mostly, it's not easy way to take the Palestinian people to the hospital inside Israel. Mostly get taken to Palestinian hospitals in Hebron, but the process is very dangerous and very long, as until the ambulance came from the city of Yatta or Hebron. It's taken him a time until he passed all this, obstacles in the road. Maybe the road is not paved sometimes. The ambulance should drove in off-road, which caused more damage and more pain for this Palestinian guy who injured, maybe, or this lady who was injured, or this kid who injured. And then to go back to the city, it's take him also a long way to pass all this off-road, then contact to the highway until he go in the city to give treatment to Palestinian people. It's never happened that they, investigate these accidents. The Israeli police or the army, they never investigated if it's happened against a Palestinian. They just, leave it as it is, and then they close the area as a closed military zone and leave. And everybody should leave. Most of the Palestinian people, treated by a Red Crescent, and there is no compensation for them after these attacks, physically in their body. Like Harun Abu Aram, he was shot, in last February in Arrakis. He shot in the throat by one bullet from one soldier when they was, fighting about the generator. And then Harun is, just he's end. He's like a dead body in his home nowadays. He's not talking, he's not moving. He just move his head and may barely talk some words. That's one of examples how the Palestinian people, when they get injured, they never get a good treatment in the long way, in the long process, and then they found themselves as stay in their home, feeling pain and pain for themselves, pain for even though for the families. And then that's what happened. It's never, completed the story of, putting these people in jail or investigated this, until the top of a real investigation. It's never happened from the Israeli authority, about this attack which happened, sometimes in a daily basis against the Palestinian societies in South Urban Hills.
Yeah, that generator, he's just trying to protect the generator in the middle of a very difficult, season. And he was shot just for trying to protect the generator. It's all on video. That's what's so astonishing. It's all, people can see it and see how it's done with impunity, where there's actually no accountability for any of that, which is very disturbing. So we have a question. It always comes up, and feel free to do with it whatever you want. Do you support a two-state solution as a way to have a Palestinian state where, as a way to freedom and dignity? Where you are on kind of two-state solution is a solution, experiencing what you're experiencing.
20 years ago, maybe we can talk about two-state solution. 2000, 2001. Before that, even though when they go to white plantation barely they came to that, agreement about them, but then everything exploded in our face, and then the Intifada was began, and then this dream was disappeared. Nowadays, there's no two-state solutions from my point of view. I'm very sure we can live in one state, but not for all the people. It's one state for one people and not the other people who are not counted in this state. This is the reality on the ground. We can talk about two-state solutions. We can put it in the papers or in the media. We can talk about it and we say, okay, there is two-state solution. But when you came to the ground and the reality, it's really far away from your reaching this. I don't know what's the politics. Think maybe the politics didn't came to the reality on the ground. And so what happened between C and A and B and the West Bank? There is no two-state solution nowadays. We can live in one state, but not for all the people. That's the solution, I think.
Yeah, it's a one-state reality, as they say. Increasingly
right.
seem to be permanent. There is a question about did the settler it's again the military cooperation with the settlers, did it increase since this new government came into be, or it's pretty much the same, we just see more of it? Basically, was there a change in recent months from your experience about this dynamic between settlers and the military? Or was it always like this? We just see more of it.
No, it's always like this from long time ago, even though from maybe more than 12 or 15 years ago, it's the same. And it's the same before even, but we see more dynamic in a relationship between settlers and the soldiers. We see a lot of cooperation between the soldiers and the settlers in the field. This is, I mean, increasing very well. And there is a big alliance between them and coalition between the both the settlers and the soldiers who, I mean, serving in the Area C or in South Hebron in general. It's really increased. There's a lot of cooperations. I mean, there's a lot of, I don't know, but they, I mean, work together mostly more than any time before.
That's great. So we'll send people that sign up for this. Not everybody can make it, but to sign up for this, the Twitter accounts of folks on the ground who report on a daily part of it and ask to bring it to your communities, talk about it with anyone you can. Eid, thank you so much for taking the time to speak to us. We admire your resilience and your fight for freedom and dignity that all human beings deserve. And we are an ally of this fight. Great to have you at our campaign against demolitions, against home demolitions. That is getting more and more international attention and is getting more and more discussed in the Israeli society, despite the reluctance. So we're hopeful that this issue and your struggle will make it to Congress and to the international media. So it'll be harder and harder to avoid or deny and we are really thankful for you and your community of Al-Mukhair and all the folks we love and follow. And follow South Hebron Hill Watch on Twitter and Facebook. And we're working to make these stories accessible to people. So thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you very much. Thank you, dear Gili, for this event. And I am so glad to be with you today. And I am glad that everybody, care for us abroad and here also. And we appreciate everybody who came and came to visit South Hebron Hills. And please welcome to visit South Hebron Hills and Masafriyat especially. And we will welcome you. We will guide you. We will host you. Everybody who came, be welcome. And inshallah, we will do it together. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Amen. Karen, you're muted.
Yeah, I got it. Thank you, Eid, and thank you, Gili. We do hope to visit you one day, Eid, in the South Hebron Hills, and we work. Inshallah, we'll be there, but in the meantime, we will work to make more and more people aware of the work you're doing and the hardships you're facing, and your community is facing. We greatly appreciate you being with us. Thank you, Gili, for moderating this session today. Thank you to our staff at Partners for Progressive Israel, Dinesh, Ron, and Julie, and thank you all for joining us for this briefing. We hope you've learned and enjoyed and will share the information. We are glad to be bringing this program to all of you. And to learn more about Partners for Progressive Israel and our future programs and our Stop the Evictions campaign, go to progressiveisrael.org. And please contribute. Every dollar you give is worth $2 through this campaign, which ends tomorrow. Thank you so much for being with us, and have a great day. Have a good evening, Eid, and may we see each other again under better circumstances.
Thank you, dear Karen. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you.
Mhm.